We believe that being a defender requires more than building shooting skills on a range. It's also a development of the heart, mind, body, and spirit. Join us as we explore what it truly means to be a defender in your training and in your everyday life. Welcome to Defenders Live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Defenders Live. I'm your host, Laura Thorson, and I'm so glad to be with you again on a Wednesday evening. We cannot believe it here, but it is November 1st. I don't know if you guys have come around to that or not, but that means pretty soon it will be Thanksgiving and then Christmas and then the new year. I'm not ready yet, but here we are. So thank you for tuning in tonight. I'm really excited to have Mr. Chuck Haggard on tonight. We're going to be talking about all things self-defense, and Chuck has an extensive background in law enforcement and as a defensive trainer. We're so fortunate to have him with us tonight. So I'm going to not do a ton of talking, and we're going to get right to the interview here shortly. But first of all, I want to thank all of you for attending tonight. If you're new or watching this as a replay, welcome. We're so glad you're here. Please drop in the comments where you're watching from. We want to hear from you tonight. Few announcements really quickly before I introduce Mr. Chuck Haggard. We are going to have a live Q&A towards the end of the broadcast. So if you guys have a question pop in your head while Chuck is talking, just put those in the comments and we'll gather those at the end of the broadcast, and he will answer those for you. So be ready for that. And also, quick reminder, if you want to be notified about these broadcasts, about what's coming up and who's coming up, please go to defenders-live.com and go to the bottom of the homepage and put in your email address so I can keep in contact with you. We also have a Facebook group, a private Defenders Live Facebook group, but I've noticed that the reach is not very good on that group when I put a post up. So if you really want me to get in touch with you, that would be the way to do it. Get on that email list. Adam Winch, the founder of Defenders USA, is behind the scenes helping me tonight. Thank God. I need all the help I can get. So if you see him pop on the screen from time to time, don't be alarmed. And you're muted, so nobody knows what that is, Adam. What is that? Explain it. You've done that 2 or 3 times and I missed it every time.
It's the screaming goat. If you've trained with me, you know what it is.
Okay, inside joke. All right, the screaming goat. See, this is what I deal with. So just get used to it, right? So if you see him just pop in on the screen, no big deal. That's just how Adam rolls. Anyway, yeah, I'll just leave that alone. All right, so let's get right into the interview with Chuck. Chuck Haggard is the founder of Agile Training and Consulting. He's been active in private defensive training throughout his long career in urban law enforcement. After 35 years in law enforcement, 28 of which was a steady upward progression through the ranks of the Topeka Police Department, he ventured out on his own to pursue private training on a more regular basis. Chuck maintains his post-certification and stays active in the law enforcement community, but he now devotes even more time to training other police officers, military personnel, security forces, and private citizens on the art and science of personal defense. Chuck is certified as a civilian and law enforcement trainer on various weapon systems, including pistol, shotgun, rifle, carbine, OC, baton, and Taser. He's also skilled and experienced at teaching weapon retention, disarming, and other empty hand techniques. He enjoys teaching and is proud to be able to contribute to this nation's widespread community of responsible, law-abiding advocates of self-defense. Wow. And we've got a lot to go over tonight. So let's bring on Mr. Chuck Haggard. Hey, Chuck.
Hi, how you doing?
Great. Thank you for coming on the show tonight. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and I'm glad that the mic is working and all is well. So we're good. We're good to go. Let's rock and roll. We've got a lot of ground to cover. I have so many questions, and I'll do my best to make them as concise as I can. But first, let's start off with, what did I miss in the bio? Did I miss anything? Do we need to flesh anything out? that's a lot of experience that you're coming
Yeah,
from
it
there.
sounds kind of ostentatious, so I think we should just leave it at that.
Okay. All right. Well, I opened the door in case you wanted to walk through it. Now, second thing before we move on, it's kind of funny, but not funny, is why does everybody on the internet call you the legendary Chuck Haggard? Where did
So,
that come from?
William April, my friend William April, he was one of the, I met him through Craig Douglas of ShivWorks, and William was one of the ShivWorks collective. Him, Craig, Larry Lindemann, Paul Sharp, the late Paul Gomez, a couple other guys that were all involved in that. But in this case, William, the first Rangemaster Tactical Conference that I attended down in Oklahoma, where I'd met, I'd never met Craig before, or Paul Gomez, a bunch of other people, Tom Gibbons, and unfortunately several other guys that are no longer with us, like Tom Green and William. And during the course of that event, William, because I was most recent, although I wasn't even born in the U.S. and I'm lived in a lot of places because my dad was in the Army, because I was from Kansas, and that's where like Dodge City and things like that, Wyatt Earp was active here and things like that.
Yeah.
He dubbed me the legendary lawman, Marshal Chuck Haggard. And then that stuck.
Okay.
And it's been with me ever since. I always said I would get William back, and he left us before I got a chance to do that. So it looks like he won.
We'll let him win.
That's a guy that if no one's ever watched his videos or read any of his stuff, William April was one of the guys that I listened to a lot. He's a 90-pound brain, super, super smart guy. Started out in law enforcement, became a psychiatrist, did a lot of things like, the kind of people that profile serial killers or, interview homicide suspects to find out what makes them tick and how long they should stay in prison and stuff like that. William was one of those guys. And he very famously said, they don't think like us. They don't think like you. Trying to get people past the idea that, somebody who's a violent criminal actor, that you can expect any mercy from, or for them to think like you, or to use the same sorts of morals and thought processes that regular people might. So yeah, I used to talk to William a couple times a week, and he's somebody I dearly miss.
Wow.
But yeah, that's where that came from.
Well, I'm glad I asked, because there's a whole story behind it, and I didn't realize that.
Yeah. And he used to correct people on the internet. They'd be like, it's Marshal Haggard. And he'd interject into like a Facebook conversation or something and be like, no, it's the legendary lawman, Marshal Chuck.
Legendary. Oh, see, and Adam put that at the bottom of the screen too, because he knew that, and I didn't know that. So see, he got it right. That's
I've
awesome.
had people think that I'd work for the Marshal Service, which I've been a cop a long time, but I've never worked for the Marshal Service, things like that. So, yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Great. All right. So, oh man, where to go with you? I mean, there's so many directions here. Okay. Just to preface here. So you've been in law enforcement for over 3 decades. Which is wild to me.
I'm working on it. I'm almost. I'll be working on my 36th year here pretty quick.
Why have you stayed in law enforcement for so long?
William also used to tell me that I was really bad at retiring, which I am. So I did.
Why? I want to know why, Chuck.
I really enjoy it. I like working at that's law enforcement at its heart is a people person type of thing. Also an unmedicated ADD kid and kind of an adrenaline junkie. I don't say that jokingly. I'm literally an unmedicated ADD kid. I think a lot of ADD kids are drawn to action adventure type, fire service, smoke jumpers, military, police, things like that. So it gives me a lot of satisfaction dealing with people, helping people out. I've been involved in all kinds of police work. Gives you what I like to call compressed human experience. You'll see things once in a lifetime events over and over and over again. And you'll see things that other people don't see, often multiple times. And so I like helping people. I think it's where my gifts are at. I'm not a brain surgeon. I'm not a rocket surgeon because, I think we should go where our strong gifts are at. And that I'm blessed that I think I've got the skills and the mindset and things like that to do well in this job that I've been allowed to be a part of for a very long time.
Is that why you got into it to begin with? Was the adrenaline and the?
So no. Back in the 80s, so I was 17 when I first went into the military in 1982. And my dad was career Army. He was a Korea vet and Vietnam vet, multiple tours in Vietnam, saw heavy combat in Korea and Vietnam. He did 27 years in the Army. And so that's what I grew up with. And he, at the end of through Vietnam, he segued from infantry to air crew. He was a helicopter crewman. And so I grew up around military air bases, Army air bases all the time. So I wanted to do one of two things, be special operations, or I wanted to fly Cobra gunships. And then back then, before things like LASIK and PRK and that sort of thing, the Army said that to be a helicopter pilot, it was 20/20 uncorrected, no exceptions, no waivers. So couldn't do that. And then in my file, when I was at Fort Knox going through basic and AIT, they marked me down for exercise-induced asthma because I had held an asthma attack there that summer in the middle of one of my runs. And that led to, if you want to do anything with special operations, they were like, yeah, thanks for your interest, but we're not interested. And then back then people were joining the military. They were over capacity so they were rifting people out, just like they had so many people trying to get into the Army because it was still a thing that people did that they could pick and choose. So I ended up doing National Guard as a part-time thing, and then law enforcement as a full-time thing. So yeah, it's kind of a accidental thing, actually, how I ended up there.
And you said that one of the things that you like the most about police work is the human interaction. Is that sometimes also the thing you dislike the most? I mean, could it be certain humans maybe? I don't know.
So you see the best of people, you see the worst of people. You see all kinds of, you see people literally at their best and at their worst. Police work has led me to meet some of the finest human beings on the planet, that is as good a people as you would ever want to know. And then some of the worst human beings on the planet, people that you would never want to meet. And so the way I look at it is those people would be there, whether I met them or not. And then it gave me a venue to both meet them. And then sometimes if it's the bad guys, to do something about it. So I think we're all there. I'm very comfortable with the concept that there's good and evil. It exists in the world. And, the old saying that's attributed to Edmund Burke, all that is necessary for evil to triumph is that good men do nothing. And there's, the Bible verse that's out there that's, the short version is, who are you going to send? Here I am, send me.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
I think
from another trainer.
I think people need to step up, and this is, where my gifts led me. So that's the path I've gone.
And is that why you became an instructor as well?
So my dad was a sniper, saw a lot of heavy combat, was a Camp Perry shooter, and that sort of thing. Really good shot, wasn't that great an instructor, but he did teach me how to shoot rifles extremely well. So when I was in the Army and then the Army Guard, because I was typically the best shot in the unit at that time, when we would go do qualifications, things like that, I would, pass on my first try. And then I remember my sergeant saying, "Hey, like Bob over here is having trouble, go help him out." And like, what is 18-year-old me supposed to do? I don't know, shoot better, try to shoot like I was shooting. Like, how do you get this across to other people? Mm-hmm. And I did my best, but I felt woefully inadequate. And then I got into police work. I was also pretty young. And then 22, 23-year-old me was like, man, a couple of things. One was that my training in the academy, I believe, was woefully inadequate. And then I had read a lot of some of my heroes were Mas Ayub, Jim Cirillo, Evan Marshall, Jeff Cooper, bunch of other guys, articles that I read. And, some of the advice that I took, like with Mas Ayub, counsel people to get instructor certifications so that you could be your own expert witness. So that seemed like a really great idea to me for a couple of reasons. So one of the reasons I did it was I figured if I went to an instructor level class, that I was going to get the best, more gooder training, and I would be better prepared for the street because I felt woefully inadequate doing that. And then I wanted to be a firearms instructor because I was still trying to, go help out Bob, and I wanted to do a better job of that. And so I got into a path of being a training junkie and throughout my police career, so that I could, one, improve the program that we had, and I could live longer. Then I could help all the guys that I was working with who wanted to train. And eventually I became a trainer for the department officially, firearms instructor, tactics instructor, defensive tactics, everything. At one point I joke I was certified to teach everything from verbal judo to sniper rifles. Like I've been to submachine gun instructor training. I've been to Army sniper school, a wide variety of firearms instructor schools. I am still involved with National Law Enforcement Training Center out of Kansas City, where all we do is teach reasonable use of force and what's commonly called defensive tactics or physical control tactics, like handcuffing, ground fighting, neck restraint, baton use, OC spray, arrest and control techniques, things like that. And our entire purpose for existence is to create an instructor. So I'm an instructor trainer in that capacity, in a law enforcement capacity. And so one of the reasons I got involved in that is, again, my training at my department was woefully inadequate. So I think you can't just complain about stuff. You got to do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as you're talking, I'm like, oh man, which question do I want to ask next? So because you touched on so many things that I could go almost any direction here. But as an instructor, let's start with this. You said that a lot of times when we were talking on the phone the other day, you said that you have to fix a lot of mistakes with people, with working with trainers that don't have a lot of experience themselves, or haven't done or worked with a lot of other instructors themselves. Like they haven't become a well-rounded shooter themselves, and a lot of times are just regurgitating information to their students, and with good intention. We're not knocking people for doing their best out there, right? But what are some of those common mistakes that you see that you end up having to correct on people that are getting taught on with those lower level trainers? So,
and I'm trying to remember back to we talked about a bunch of stuff on the phone yesterday.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I see there's a real problem, and this has been a real almost a plague in the law enforcement community. And because training has become more of a thing in the non-law enforcement world, like concealed carry, what Pat Rogers used to call average earth people world, is that there's a lot of shake and bake instructors. So in the law enforcement community, you might have a cop has an interest in shooting, and they might be a pretty decent shot, but what I find is most cops don't really know what good is. Like they may be a big fish in a small pond kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Then they go to a firearms instructor school, maybe a state academy-based thing, which most states have, or the NRA school. Like I have been to NRA. The first time I went, it was a revolver and shotgun combination course. And then semi-auto pistols, submachine gun, tactical rifle, or patrol rifle, tactical shooting, things like that. So been through all those courses with the NRA, but the basic course, you're there for 5 days. It's 44 contact hours, I think it was, if I remember right. And then bam, you're an instructor. So that really doesn't give you a depth or breadth of knowledge in shooting, especially if you have a guy that's an instructor who has only been through the training that his department puts on, and now he's been through a shake and bake firearms instructor course, and then they are teaching people in their in-service or their academy. That's in no way giving anybody any expertise. Typically, you don't see guys like that competitive at any rate. Bullseye, PPC, USPSA, IDPA. Typically, they're not competitors. And what I found is they're often not high-level shooters. And so I'm picking on the law enforcement community because I know quite a bit about it. And I've seen, one of my hobbies was when I would travel, I would go look at other people's programs, their ranges, talk to people, do ride-alongs with other departments, things like that. And I've been to a wide variety of places and seeing how they do business because I'm always looking for a better idea. And everything I'm saying about the law enforcement community and law enforcement training, it applies, but it also applies to the non-law enforcement concealed carry firearms training world, probably to a greater degree. In that too many instructors go to instructor school and then they have the I'm an instructor t-shirt, and then that's it. They really don't work past that point. They don't attend professional things like, in the law enforcement world, we have ILFE, International Association of Law Enforcement Firearms Instructors, or ILETA or NTOA or something like that. So most people don't attend big conferences, network with other instructors. They don't compete for the most part. So when you run up when you're on the range with like a legit USPSA Grandmaster, you realize that, man, the first time I did that back in the 80s, and I shot an El Prez, and I was pretty proud of myself because I always read Jeff Cooper said, if you shoot an El Prez in under 10, you're doing pretty good. So I was doing pretty good because I had that thing in like 8.2. And I wish I could remember the gentleman's name who was, he's a USPSA GM, and he shot it in like 3.9, and of course he was shooting a race gun and I was shooting my duty gun, but that guy was done with the entire course before I got the first 6 shots off when you look at the timer. So it gave me a real sense of what good looks like, what human beings can do with pistols. And if you don't if you're a big fish in a small pond, then yeah, but you really need to broaden your horizons. Mm-hmm. Too many people get that instructor certificate and park, and then they regurgitate the same stuff over and over again. I like to tell people that you either have to be training all the time, you have to continue to improve your skills, which are evolving, or you're stagnant. And with water, we know what happens when you're not flowing. You're stagnant, you get kind of mossy, algae grows, you start to smell bad. That's not a good place to be. So when I deal with people constantly, and I try to be, not to step on toes and things like that, but when I see gross errors that they're doing, that they tell me, well, this instructor taught me this, like, and this instructor taught me that.
Give me an example.
Like I had a lady when I was training out of town. I had a lady at a range where she was basically doing the old cup and saucer, like the teacup type grip. Yeah. Oh, well, I was taught to do that. take a deep breath, say something nice, show her how to fix it. And then what I'm on the verge of a jihad with the state academy in my state, because the firearms instructors down there force people to pin the trigger and then ride the reset, and pin the trigger and ride the reset. What I find is
why that's not a good idea.
Well, for a lot of reasons. One, the idea that you're going to pin the trigger, milk the reset out till it just clicks, and that's somehow going to be better because you didn't let the trigger all the way out, causes a couple problems. I could show you videos if I had, if I was one of those internet gurus, of officers getting trigger freeze. You ever tried to shoot real fast and all of a sudden your gun's not going off because you didn't allow it to actually reset? Well, if you're training yourself to just barely let it reset, what happens under stress is you pin that trigger and you get trigger freeze. I could show you a particular video of a trooper. He gets shot on a car stop and he's backing up. He gets one round off, blows the mirror off the car, misses the bad guy, tries to get another shot off, and you see him on the body cam look at his gun like it's betrayed him, and then he dashes off camera. And what happened was he had got one shot off and not let the gun reset, and he's trying to make it go, and it's not going to go. So that's a problem. The other problem I find is people get so mentally focused on how to let the trigger reset, especially like on police qualification courses, because you only have a certain amount of time for a certain amount of shots. So people get this idea of, I got to get my shots off instead of I got to get my hits. So they'll be worried about getting that click, and then they wham the trigger. Then they'll milk the reset, and then they'll wham the trigger again. So over and over and over again, they're missing, right? With your knowledge of firearms, does how you let go of the trigger help you put bullets accurately in the target? Or is it how you bring the trigger to the rear that assists you in putting bullets accurately in the target?
Yeah, it's pressing the trigger. Chuck, I just saw that commented. Is it your birthday? Do we need to sing to you tonight? What are you, 38 tonight?
Something that's funny, because Sherman, my good friend Sherman House said, "Hey, happy 38th birthday." No, I'm 59.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny because my dad said he quit having birthdays after 38, so I just assume everybody's 38.
Yeah, I'm 59 now.
Adam, I'm glad you're on the screen so you can sing to him. So go ahead.
Oh heavens, no! Hey Chuck, so you were talking about a couple different things that are of interest to me. One, you were talking about the one where the trooper pinned the trigger to the rear. One hit the mirror on the car, then couldn't get the next shot off because he pinned the trigger to the rear. And for Laura, just so you know, that actually happened in Montana.
Did it?
So look that up on the internet. Yeah, it's a fantastic video.
The one I'm referencing was in Washington State.
Ah, okay.
So when I say it happens, I don't mean once. This isn't a black swan event. This is stuff that happens.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's trained all the time by all the police departments, right? My PD also trained the same thing, right? And it's an unfortunate thing. The other thing is, Chuck, if you don't mind if I jump in here, that you were talking about the shake and bake instructors, and that's a real passion of mine. I've found that the vast majority of people out there can either teach you how to shoot, and that's usually about it. Yet for me, I'm just as important. It sounds like the way you're talking too. To me, I find just as important as dealing not just with the fight itself and the skill of using a gun, but dealing with the massive aftermath. And that aftermath is humongous. And I think that the vast majority of the training world doesn't address that well. And that's why I'm so glad somebody like you can come in with a massive amount of experience and talk about that stuff too.
Well, there's part of the reason I do what I do is because I've learned you have two fights to win. The first one's going to be on the street, and the second one's going to probably be in court. No matter how righteous you are, we've seen that. You can have an activist DA that decides to put you up on charges. No matter how righteous you are, you can end up like I've seen case totally good justified shootings, legally, morally, ethical, constitutional wise, and you end up in federal court with allegations of civil rights violations and all sorts of things. So yeah, there's two fights you have to win. First one's on the street. You got to live long enough to get sued. And then the second one is you got to survive in court, and then perhaps twice in court, because it could be a criminal case and or a civil case all at the same time.
So this is something you talked about. I got to actually take a 4-hour training course from you at the Active Self-Protection Conference several years ago. And then we've kind of co-taught, in a sense, at the same conference. And I got to tell you, that was one thing you talked about that for me, I found for me after my defensive use of a gun as a cop, that the aftermath is something very few people had prepared me for. And I think the vast majority of shake and bake instructors you're talking about does the same thing. So I appreciated that you did that. And I think that for others that are going out and looking for training, look for not just the shooting skill, but look for the skill of surviving the aftermath too. And if you get the chance, go train with Chuck.
Knowing the law. Yeah.
So Laura and I talked about that on the phone, and we talked about what we're going to talk about. And one of the things that I pointed out was I do. Well, I talked about how sometimes you get all kinds of BS, like the difference between, competition is going to get you killed in the streets and things like that. Now, I do think there are training modalities that you can engage in that could be somewhat counterproductive on the street. I could tell you, if you get into the habit of doing absolute max speed splits, if you bill drill a guy in real life, after the first couple of shots, the odds are pretty good. The bad guy's not going to be there anymore, and then your rounds are going somewhere. Yeah, somewhere. So,
contrary to that, if you're used to only shooting one every time, too, that's another. That's the other side of it, right?
It depends.
You drill pairs or just shooting once every time you draw, that kind of thing.
What I see on the street is a lot of people panic and go cyclic, and they're going as fast as they can go. Mm-hmm. And what we know is from multiple cases, and the science from Force Science Research Center, that the odds are you're going to fire minimum of 3 to 4 shots past the point that you had some sort of stimulus that it was time to stop shooting, like the bad guy disappeared out of your sight picture, that sort of thing. Which can be a very bad thing. That's how bystanders get hit, allegations of excessive force, things like that occur. But quite frankly, I know of very few cases where somebody just fired once or just fired twice and then somehow ended up dead. I can't think of a case where I can point to something like that happening. But I know a lot of them where people went into panic fire mode and then sent rounds downrange, sent rounds into bystanders, sent, whatever. And I know some very high level guys that have had things like that happen. So, and anyway, my point of all that was just, I don't buy into the whole, street versus competition gets you killed in the street, yada, yada, yada. Don't buy into it. I shoot not as active as I haven't had the time to be as active as I used to be. But, over the decades, I've shot PPC, bullseye, military matches, IDPA, USPA. I used to shoot a lot of USPSA in my area because it's all we had. We didn't have concealed carry in Kansas for a very long time. So IDPA just didn't catch on until that kind of became a thing. But USPSA, pure match shooters where guys would show up, get their rig out of the bag, jock up, shoot the match, gun goes back in the bag, goes in the trunk. There was no concealed carry culture in Kansas. So at any rate, I shot USPSA because that's what there was and military matches and PPC and things like that. And I really do believe that competition can give you an edge as long as you're mindful of your venue and then what you're training and how you're training. Some of the people that I tried to emulate, like I was blessed to have Jim Cirillo as a friend before he passed, and he was kind enough to let much younger, dumber me ask him dumb questions on the phone, and we could talk over barbecue and things like that when he was in the area. And he was a big competitor, and he was also a big handgun hunter. But PPC was his thing, because that was the thing back then. But he was a very high level competition shooter, and thought that and his handgun hunting is what made him very steady when it went live, when he was in the fights that he was in. So and there's a bunch of other people I could point to, more up to date. My friend Matt Little, special forces guy, retired cop, USPSA GM. If you look at his friend Frank Proctor, just recently retired special forces dude, USPSA GM. I don't think being a Grand Master held them back as a special forces guy. I'm just going to guess that wasn't. They obviously weren't killed in Mogadishu because they were Grand Master shooters. So I don't buy into that idea, but I do think you need to be mindful of what venue you're in, and then what tactics and what you're using and things like that. Because I have, I was at training a counterterrorism course at Rich Mason's excellent direct action resource center. And we had a guy in my team for that training evolution that was a military guy who was a GM shooter, got disoriented in the some of the evolutions, and I watched him do friendly fire incidents in the middle of a simunitions gunfight. I was in Amos, Craig Douglas's most excellent arm movement and structures course, and I was watching the final Evo, where it's supposed to be, you got a bad guy, and in this case it involved a young lady that was an actor who was your niece, and this guy was a M-class IDPA guy, rolled through the door and ended up burning down the bad guy, but then shooting his niece 4 times. That's a news, So I don't necessarily think it's going to get you killed in the street or anything like that, but I do think you have to be very mindful of your training. So what we were talking about on the phone, Laura, was I do see a lot of people do things like fantasy band camp with guns. And guys want to go rappel out of flaming helicopters because that's really cool and it's fun. But I think if you don't have your basic gear and your skills squared away, especially if you're in an armed profession, especially if you're a cop or a military guy, something like that. But if you carry a gun on a daily basis, which most people should, but that's a whole nother conversation. But you should have your basic skills, your handgun skills and things like that squared away before you start worried about things like, what kind of matching camouflage do I have on my plate carrier while I go to carbine class?
So if I can jump in one more time here, Laura.
Sure, yeah.
If a couple things here. One, you mentioned Jim Cirillo. For those of you watching, if you ever get the chance, go read about that man, that hero right there. I think this country owes that man right there a massive debt of gratitude, and the stuff that man went through is incredible. And then a couple of the others he mentioned, Matt Little, and a couple others, right? You should go check those folks out. But Chuck, you mentioned the bill drill. I got to tell you, in the training that I do, I've more or less thrown that thing away. I see it as a really good indicator of skill, right? It's a good indicator of skill, but I don't see it as realistic on the fight in the streets of America, which is what the vast majority of people have in America. And I'd like your thoughts, because I've purposely tossed out of my courses except for just sheer skill demonstration. And I just see it as legalistically in today's logistic America as problematic. Am I wrong in my thinking there? Because I just see that causing a lot of problems in court.
So where I see people having problems is where they get kind of obsessed with a certain thing. People will be like, okay, I'm going to, and my friend Brian Eastridge and Daryl Bolke call some of the stuff that's out there. And I'm friends with some of these instructors, so I'm not trying to kick anybody in the gonads. Yeah. But there's a lot of people that want to go out there and collect range Pokemon. So I'm going to get this award from this shooting class. So I'm not going to lie. Like when I did Gabe White's class and I was shooting an old ass Gen 3 Glock from duty gear, and which I got a little bit of a handicap right there, and I got a light pin from Gabe White's class, just short of a turbo pin. That was pretty cool. That is what it is. But I see people get kind of obsessed with some of this stuff, and then certain drills are involved in that. And let's say one of those is a bill drill, so they'll shoot it over and over and over again. And then what they want to do is get really. It's like testing for the test. You want to get really good at drills, right?
Yeah.
So my late friend Todd Green famously had the fast test. So, and then Ernest Langdon still does the fast coins. It is a great short test because it's a test. So what Todd cautioned people to do with that is not shoot it over and over and over again, but every once in a while you pop up and you shoot it cold, because it's a test of where am I at? Because if you think about just the fast test in particular, you're going to draw from concealment or from a duty rig. You're going to do the 2 shots to the head box. You're going to do an out of battery reload. And then you're going to do 4 fast shots into the circle on the chest. So what that test is my grip good? Is my conceal draw or my duty, retention holster if I'm a cop, is that squared away? Did I get a good grip? And I'm drawing 2 low percentage shots. So that's the head box at 305 is fairly tight shot. Then I got to hammer my reload, and then I really got to gas it up to get those 4 rounds into that chest within, the time hack that I'm trying to make. Let's say I'm trying to make a coin run. So it's a test. You don't do it over and over and over again. You do it once or twice cold, or at the end of a training session, and then you call it good, and maybe you don't do it for another month or 2. So that's where I see something like a bill drill should be, because when you look at what does that really test? Test your grip, your stance, and make sure your grip's not falling apart under more than 2 shots, that kind of thing. So the proper place, I think, for a bill drill would be, today I'm going to work some speed on the trigger. I'm going to see where I'm at on my grip sight trigger. Can I hold, the time hack, the standards on a bill drill? Maybe you shoot a couple of those, and if you don't do well, then if you analyze that, why did that fall apart? Maybe traction on my grip, or insufficient grip, or I haven't worked with that holster enough. Maybe I got a crappy grip out of the holster because I don't have proper ride height in my holster. Whatever the case may be, you look at why you did poorly, revisit that some other time. And there's a lot of good drills out there. Cooper's got some, obviously. Bill Wilson's got a few. Ken Hackthorne, Hackthorne and Vickers set up things like the test. If you look at the test, that's a 10-round event. But what is that? What is that test? Do we shoot? Is it realistic to shoot 10-round strings all on the same target on the street? Probably not. I would hope if you'd put 3, 4, 5 into a guy's torso and he's still up and in the fight, that you get the idea that you really need to change channels. Maybe you need to go for a headshot or pelvis shot or whatever the case may be, what's appropriate to the scenario. But so we don't shoot the test. We don't, work up to shoot 10-round strings. That's a test. So used correctly, I think things like bill drills, fast test. I learned some outstanding ones, a couple of really good ones from Justin Dial a couple of weekends ago. I was down in Dallas training with Justin Dial. That was an outstanding class. These things are good for measurement, and they're not necessarily scenario based, where like what you're talking about with a bill drill, obviously not necessarily a scenario where, okay, I'm going to draw as fast as I can and I'm going to try hammer 6 into this dude before what he falls, things like that. And with your experience, Adam, what happens after the first shot?
Yeah, people start to go down.
If everybody's moving in one way, shape, or form, if your dude is still on his feet, if he's not disabled or diminished, he's going to be moving. He's not going to stand still and let him, be a cooperative cardboard target and let you shoot him. So that's where I find things like moving from one dot to the next. We did that in Justin Dial's class, or maybe a half pres or an L pres, things like that, where you have some variety in some of this stuff. I think, truthfully, I think one of the most realistic, if you want to get into competition widgets that may be good practice for a gunfight, would be a Texas Star. Because if you get a hit, or if you get a bad hit, or things start moving, nobody's shooting 6 shots on a Texas Star as fast as they do on a bill drill. You just can't do it. And then what do you have to do after you hit the first shot? You have to mentally adjust to something that's slightly moving, and where am I going from there? And I know high level competitors will kind of game it. Okay, I'm going to, I know to start here, and then I'm going to work my way through that. But the whole thing is still moving at some point. So I think that's kind of a somewhat realistic approximation of a live target, because if you hit your dude, he's going to be moving. Maybe he's dropping, maybe he's moving to the side, maybe he's flinching, whatever the case may be, but there's going to be movement involved.
I think that's so crucial, what all you just said, right? It's, instead of becoming a really good at one specific drill or 2 specific drills, is being the generalist all around with a quality amount of skill, and really being a thoughtful shooter, right? If you're going to shoot in defensive life, you've got to be thoughtful about it and understand the difference between competition and running a certain drill all the time, and being able to vary things. And man, you just said that well. So I'll back out, but I'm so glad you're here, and happy birthday.
Thanks.
Happy birthday. Okay, so wait, let me get you back on here. All right, we're running out of time, Chuck. So I'm gonna give you like I forget what they call it. The fast. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But we're in the final stretch here, guys. So if you have questions for Chuck, put those in the comments, and we'll get to those here in a little bit. So Chuck, let me get back to my questions, because Adam got me thrown off there. Tell me, from your perspective in law enforcement, what is one of the most common ways that people get themselves in trouble? Just general everyday people getting themselves in trouble, and then the event escalating, and then you end up having to show up on the scene. What is the most common thing that they do wrong?
One of the biggest mistakes I see is when people are in their house and something is going on outside, maybe a car burglary or a trespass or something like that. And then they go outside and there's a confrontation outside. If you're bunkered up in the house, don't go outside unless you have, somebody kidnapping your spouse or your child or some other life safety thing. But people getting their cars broken into, trespassers, things like that. I see people leave the house. It turns into a confrontation. Mm-hmm. And I can already hear people saying, well, I'm going to blah, blah, blah. Okay. Mm-hmm. So sometimes bad guys use tactics. We had some bad guys that were here in Topeka that were running a crew. They were doing nighttime burglaries where they're breaking into people's houses in the middle of the night. And they would have a dude post up on the hallway with the bedrooms in case you got up, and everybody else would haul all the electronics off. And then we have a lot of split level houses here. So you got like a 2-story roof and then a 1-story garage. Well, they'd boost a dude up on the low roof with a shotgun because they had a case one time where a dog chased one of the guys in the backyard. The owner came out back. They ended up killing the guy's dog. The owner ran back inside the house, but they had a bad guy. What they started doing, we found out, was putting a bad guy if they had a low roof, putting a bad guy on the roof. So think about this. You're going to go outside the door to go confront bad guys that you see, and you don't know that they've got a partner that's got a shotgun behind you. Mm-hmm. You can't win that. You certainly can't win that by yourself. That's just dumb. I have seen people take what would have probably been a good defensive shooting if somebody had broken into the house, but they go outside to confront the person before the break-in actually occurs. And then there's a shooting on the porch or in the front yard, and that turns it into a manslaughter trial, that sort of thing. I know of one case where a guy went outside because he thought somebody was breaking into his car. It's dark. He tells the guy to stop. The guy's walking towards him. He shoots the dude. It turns out to be an Alzheimer's patient that had wandered off from a facility. I don't know how you live with that. That's where you become alcoholic and, drink yourself to death kind of thing. So leaving the house, that's dumb.
Mm-hmm.
Road rage, getting involved in road rage and then getting out of the car, and because you're going to have some sort of confrontation or tell people, what you think of whatever, is also just dumb as hell. So in general, getting emotionally involved in BS, getting emotionally involved in disputes with stupid people is stupid. So if you're going to run around with a gun and you're not going to be a criminal, things that you have to ask yourself are is what I'm about to get involved in worth me dying for? Is it worth me killing for? Is it worth me going to prison for? Is it worth me getting sued and then somebody else is living in my house and driving my car?
Mm-hmm. That's very well said.
To steal a line from my friend Wayne Dobbs, every time you strap on a gun, you're making a life and death and financial decision. That's the harsh reality of the world. Mm-hmm. So those are glaring mistakes. The other thing I see is when we have home defense things, I don't know how many times I've heard of cases where somebody hears some sort of bump in the night and they think they got a burglary and that they shoot at the person and it turns out to be a family member or something like that, because we know teenagers will do things like sneak out and go drink beer with their friends and then try to sneak back in the house and not get caught and that sort of thing. So not putting as much skill into tactics and use of a flashlight in a low light scenario is something that has caused some tragedy. And then we see a lot of untrained people. That's a conversation my friend Claude Warner and I, the tactical professor. If you don't pay attention to Claude, you should. That's literally his blog, is the tactical professor. Like William, he's another 90-pound brain. So that's something that Claude and I have talked about, is the number of people who are successful in defensive encounters with firearms with no training. It's very, very high. Mm-hmm. But they also are the vast majority of representation of people in all of these, what he calls negative outcomes. Shootings that never should have happened, the guy that leaves the house, the guy that gets into the road rage shooting and ends up on a manslaughter charge, the guy that shoots his 16-year-old daughter sneaking into the house. All of these are also the untrained people as well. So I think your survival quotient goes up the more training you have. I think your odds of a negative outcome go down the more training you have, the better training you have.
A couple more things, and this sort of a part of that. I think this needs to be said, and I know you're not a lawyer, so I'm not asking you for legal advice, Chuck, but you've seen a thing or two, and this gets asked I've seen this many times get asked in classes. Usually it starts out with a scenario of some kind where the student says, well, but what if this happens and then and then am I justified, right? We get those scenarios all the time. And I think it's important for you, if you wouldn't mind, to be clear with people about the use of lethal force versus the legal use of non-lethal force. I've heard a lot of people not agree with, and it doesn't matter if you agree with it or not, it's the law. Don't agree with, well, I should be able to use lethal force in defense of my property. And then they want to know, well, what does that exactly entail? Does it mean my dog? Does it not mean my dog? They're like a family member to me. I'm sure you've heard all of these conversations before, but I think that this is important and should be addressed.
So in broad strokes, you can use physical force, let's say a punch in the nose or pepper spray, obviously to defend yourself from physical force. One of the reasons I'm an advocate for OC is that it allows you to apply physical force to another person from a distance. It's effective against people and dogs. So can you defend your dog from another dog utilizing pepper spray? Yeah, you can. You defend yourself against a dog and avoid launching rounds in an urban environment. Let's say you're out for a bike ride or something. You end up having to spray a dog. Is it better to spray the dog or shoot the dog and risk launching bullets in an urban environment? I think that question answers itself. So you can utilize physical force to defend property. everywhere. You can't use deadly force to defend property. You can only use deadly force when you are under reasonable fear of death or great bodily harm, or somebody that you're responsible for, say a family member, spouse, child, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So another place that I would direct people to do some deep reading, because people hit me with the scenario. So if da 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 da, can I shoot him? Like they're looking for an excuse, and there is no bright line. There is no black and white. You get very few scenarios of, when I'm doing thought experiments with people, if I were to roll through the door as a cop during the Columbine event, and those two shooters were standing in the library next to a pile of bodies holding smoking shotguns, can I shoot them? Well, very clearly. But do we get things that are that unambiguous? Typically, no. It's the world is far, far more shades of gray than that kind of bright black and white or green light scenario. So we got to think about that. And can you shoot them? Can is, I don't know, can you? Do you have the ability? Have you squared away your mindset and your skills and things like that? But it's common to say just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, that's where I was going next, Chuck. You just go. You just keep going.
A friend of mine that so I would tell people to look up the site Modern Service Weapons that a couple of my friends used to run. It's now kind of an archive, but there is an article written there by a friend that I can't give you his real name because he's still an active dude, very high level. He has to write under a pen name because he's still in the judicial system. But trust me, he's got a lot of experience in the judicial system at a very high level. And he wrote an article called The Paradigm of Deadly Force. It's can, may, should, must. So legally, the may is what does the law say you can do? At the point you are in reasonable fear of death and or great bodily harm, you can utilize deadly force to stop that attack. The thing is, a jury has to agree with you. A DA's office has to agree. People think I was in fear for my life is some sort of magic get out of jail free phrase or free card, like, in Monopoly. And it's not. It has to be reasonable. And a jury or the DA's office and a grand jury or a jury have to agree with you that it was reasonable under the totality of the circumstances. So, may. And then we get into what he calls should. So if you have a scenario, you're like, yeah, I really should shoot this guy. And I point this out as a cop. I don't know how many times I had a dude at gunpoint that under the letter of the law, I could have legally shot and didn't because it just hadn't really crossed that line for me yet. I could tell you, especially in the 80s and 90s when the crack wars were going on and Boys in the Hood was like my thing every day when I went on patrol. If I'd shot everybody that I could have shot under the May paradigm, I would have got nothing else done. I would have got into a shooting, gone through a 2, 3, 4 week post-shooting investigation, got back on the street. A couple days later, would have shot somebody else and repeated the process over and over again for 20, 30 years. So that's where he wrote the may and then the should part and then the must. So I would agree. If we go back to my scenario of if you rolled through the door of the library at Columbine, or you see, Charles Manson with a bloody machete on a kindergarten playground, you pretty much legally, morally, ethically, you should probably shoot that guy as quickly as possible. But you have to look at these scenarios at, is it a may? Is it a should? Is it a must? And then you're going to have to get to a DA's office, probably a grand jury, maybe a criminal impaneled jury to agree with your decision. But that article is something I would caution people to read more than once.
That's really good. Okay, one more thing, and then I'll let you go if you're okay with that.
Yeah, I'm perfect.
Okay. All right. So along the lines of just because you can doesn't mean maybe you should. This is it honestly should not be controversial at all, but I've had so many conversations about this with students. And so I just wanted to highlight this coming from somebody with your experience level. Just because you can open carry in a state, does that mean you should?
So obviously in a uniform capacity, I have open carried for a very long time because that's the expectation. That's how cops and military do things. So I've open carried. I have always open carried in the most robust, secure holster that I could get my hands on. Early in my career, if we go back to the 70s and the 80s, the cops being victims of gun grabs and getting shot with their own gun has always been with the police service. So if we go back to the 70s and 80s when security holsters weren't quite what they are now, training wasn't quite what it is now, somewhere in the order of 20 to 25% of all of the law enforcement officers feloniously murdered in the line of duty were killed with their own gun. Think about that. 1 out of 3,
Crazy.
1 out of 5 were killed with their own gun. So having your gun unconcealed is a tactical disadvantage. And we try to mitigate that with good training, extensive training, and with a very heavy duty, high quality holster. A lot of cops are running around with level 3 Safariland rigs and rigs of equal quality because of that. So the other thing I would tell you is that gives the bad guy the option of the first move. Going back to William April again, him and I were having long conversations about this before he passed. Just in New Orleans, where he lived, he had documented 28 incidents of open carry people who were specifically targeted for and robbed of their firearm. So what'll happen is they get spotted, they get a firearm. A dude or 2 or 3 decide they're going to go relieve you of your firearm. So I have people talk a lot of bluster, but if you have a guy walks up and sticks a gun in your face while another dude is removing your gun out of the holster, you're not going to do anything. You're not going to do a cool move, pull out a backup gun, have a hideout. They're going to take your gun, and you'll be lucky if you don't get shot in the face during the process. So I'm a firm believer in you should have the legal right to do so, because I know there's been states, I think Texas was that way for a while, which is disappointing. Texas, I'm kind of ashamed of you for that. But where you could have concealed carry, but if your gun showed in public, like let's say heavy gust of wind blew your coat open and people could see your gun, that you could get arrested for that because it wasn't concealed and open carry wasn't legal. Well, that's just stupid. I think you should have the legal right to open carry, but I think tactically it doesn't make any sense at all outside of I'm going to go hunting, training on the range, things like that. Tactically, it gives the bad guy the option of the only people you're scaring away are the people that you really don't have to worry about. The really hardened bad guys, do you think that they haven't seen guns before? Do you think they haven't had guns pulled on them? Do you think they don't want to be the next 50 Cent that is able to brag about multiple bullet holes that they've survived? That's a lot of street cred for guys like that. And the hardened criminals are not going, you're not establishing a crime-free bubble by walking around with a visible firearm. And then the fact of the life is that most people that I see running around with open carry have rigs that are pathetic. They won't survive a gun grab. They won't survive a fight. They won't retain the gun in a fight. And they're certainly not spending. The last I looked at a level 3 Safariland duty holster, something like on the order of $180. Most people are not, a lot of people don't even want to spend $30, $40 on a holster from what I've seen. So quality gear really matters. On top of that, being diligent, there's a specific study of how to do weapon retention training. There's very few trainers out there doing that. I do it. Guys like Paul Sharp, my friend Cecil Birch, Craig Douglas covers that in his excellent ECQC classes, things like that. Most of the trainers I've seen, and certainly most of the firearms trainers I see, are not covering that. Like, how do you retain your gun if you're jumped for your gun when you're carrying open carry? They just don't cover it. So not just Williams' 28 cases, but I've documented a bunch of cases where people have been robbed, targeted for, and robbed of their gun. So I think if I got to pull my gun, I want it to be a surprise that the bad guy didn't see coming, just didn't see coming. So that's.
Thank you for clearing that up.
As we had the conversation on the phone, I pointed out in my state, there is no law that what people would think of as indecent exposure. So legally, I can walk around with no pants on. I can legally walk around with no pants on.
Yeah.
But just because I can doesn't mean I should. There's just things that should be common sense, but sadly they're not. I know them. Some people are going to find what I've said offensive, and I'm somehow anti-Second Amendment, that sort of thing. Nothing could be further from the truth. I think there's a lot of tactical disadvantages to open carry that people haven't really put thought into. And if you're going to do it, you really need to do it right. You need to be diligent about things like a proper belt, gear selection, that sort of thing. I had a friend 4 days ago who's a Metropolitan Police officer. He was jumped for his gun, and in the fight, his Safariland duty rig, he had a $180 holster, eventually broke in the fight, and he took a bullet in the leg from his own gun before he managed to kill the bad guy. So if you think about that, and the fact that most people don't buy the top rated retention holsters when they're out there open carrying and that sort of thing, they're really leaving themselves at a disadvantage in very realistic scenarios.
So well said. I just can't believe I only get an hour. This is just unfair, but that's okay. So Chuck, if somebody wants to train with you, what do you have coming up? Where will you be, and where can they find out more about you?
So my website is my company's Agile Training and Consulting, and the paradigm of my training, most of my training is I do have stuff that's packaged, and I don't want to sound like I'm bashing on other instructors. Like my friend Pat Rogers, one of my mentors, he had a carbine operators course. So if you go to carbine operators course, you're going to go for 3 days. You're going to have, day 1, 2, 3. If you were to go to that class next year, there would be some development, but you would know I'm going to go to this package of a class. I do have some classes like that, but a lot of my training that I do, particularly local stuff, things that I've done for agencies or private clients, that sort of thing, is it's entirely client-driven needs. So Craig Douglas helped me pick the name for my company. Agile is a project that can change on a dime. You can turn on a dime. So I look at client needs and what they want, what they need, and I put training packages together for people. I do have some standardized classes that I do that I kind of gear towards whoever's hosting me, what they're looking for, that sort of thing. So the next thing I'm doing is Revolver Roundup, the Pat Rogers Memorial Revolver Roundup at the famous gun site facility. So I'm privileged to be an instructor to be teaching at the legendary gun site facility. There's still, if anybody wants to spend 3 days learning everything there is to know about revolvers, there are still a few spots open for Revolver Roundup at gun site. Past that, I'll be down in the Murfreesboro, Tennessee, teaching my OC instructor course that I developed specifically it was by request of the non-cop world to come up with something that was not a police-centric OC instructor course. So I'm teaching that with my friend Akil down there. Citizen Safety Academy is his outfit down there in Murfreesboro. So Ak has hosted me for that and a combative handgun class. I got some stuff coming up locally here, low light classes. My small guns class is a very popular one. I've got some more OC instructor. I saw Robin was in the comments. I'm teaching at a Girl and a Gun at the National Girl and a Gun Conference. I'll be teaching at the Tactical Conference in Dallas again. And so my website is agiletactical.com. I couldn't get, you have to get what the internet domain name gods are going to give you. So Agile Training was already taken by somebody. So agiletactical.com is my website. And I try to keep my training calendar on all my open courses is up to date as possible. So if anybody's interested, I got Facebook. I've got under my name and my Agile Training Consulting. I've got my website as well. So you can email me or message me on the hit my DMs, that kind of thing.
Is that how you say it?
That's what I hear the kids are talking about nowadays.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know the lingo, to be honest. So,
I
Chuck,
don't
any
either.
parting thoughts? That's okay. We know what you mean. We put it all up. Adam put it all up at the bottom of the screen so you guys know right where to find him. Be sure to reach out to him if you're interested in any of his training. I just love Chuck. I don't see how anybody couldn't. So any parting thoughts for especially the people out there who this might be the first time they've ever seen you, and maybe some of the things that you've said tonight are new to them? What are some of the things you'd like to leave them with as far as just general ideas of staying safe in the world we live in today as an everyday civilian?
Most people give some sort of lip service to mindset and situational awareness without actually practicing that. Those two right there will keep you out of a lot of trouble. Following Farnham's device of don't go do stupid things with stupid people in stupid places. Tom Gibbons famously says that he's done a lot of research and found that almost 100% of bar fights occur in bars. So, Farnham's admonition holds up. The other thing is I firmly believe software trumps hardware, that you don't have to have a staccato with, the newest iteration of a Trijicon sight and a light and a 24 round magazine. That whole "you're going to get killed in the streets" thing is just utter BS. If we look at what's really important is have a gun, actually carry your gear, and actually have it with you in an emergency. There's all kinds of gunfights that occurred where what the gun was, what the ammo in the gun was, things like that just didn't matter. It's the fact that the person had the expertise and the software on board and had their tools with them when the balloon went up. That's the important thing. I firmly believe software trumps hardware, that training is more important than the gear you have. I'll point out, we go back to Jim Cirillo. Guys like Jim Cirillo did a lot of good work with a 6-shot 38 or 5-shot 38 revolver and some they didn't even have hollow points back then. So some of the legendary gunfighters out there, how many people will watch like The Highwaymen with Frank Hammer when they were tracking down Bonnie and Clyde? That was a pretty popular movie a few years ago. Guess what Frank Hammer never had? He didn't have a staccato and he didn't have jacketed hollow points, but he had a lot of mindset and he had a lot of software. He had a lot of marksmanship on board. So I would tell people that training in this community, I think, is overvalued, and that hardware is, training is undervalued. Hardware is overvalued. What do people put pictures of on their Instagram page? Brand new gun, brand new stocks, things like that. Not a lot of people put their certificates up. Hey, I just, graduated from whatever high-speed operator course. Maybe you actually did rappel out of flaming helicopters. That's something to be proud of. But I firmly believe software trumps hardware. But I also believe carry your gear. Tom Gibbons' admonition was that he had, the last I knew, 68 concealed carry students who have won the fight that they were offered, carjacking, robbery, things like that. He's had 0 losses and 3 defaults. And what he means by that is 3 of his students, unfortunately, were not armed on the day that they got elected by a bad guy to be a victim, and they were murdered during the course of a robbery, carjacking, that sort of thing. Pat Rogers famously talked about a couple of his students, unfortunately, who had been to one of his courses, just spent 3 days shooting a lot of ammo and got pretty proficient. And then they loaded up all their stuff in the truck, and they go to the stop and rob to get gas on their road trip. What do you do on a road trip? Get gas and snacks. Well, at the gas pump, they got jacked. One of them got killed and the other one got wounded and ended up in the ICU. Where was their gear? All packed up in the bags in the back of the truck. So Pat would very famously say, carry your effing gun. Of course, he was not quite as nice about that, but carry your gear. Get trained up and then carry your gear.
That is so crazy that you said that, because today when I went to town, I go to town often, and I just put my pepper spray in my pocket there, and I thought, you know what, I don't have time to put my gun on, I'll just go. And I stopped myself and I was like, no, it takes you 30 seconds, but these are things, probably you don't think about this, and maybe other people that are watching, but seriously, it takes you 30 seconds to put it on. Just put it on.
That's one of the reasons why I teach. One of my specialty courses is my small guns course, and I teach myself, Wayne Dobbs, Daryl Bolke, some of my other friends, like snub 38 revolvers, that sort of thing. Because people will think, well, this isn't like 5-shot 38 isn't a serious gun, or like Glock 42 380 isn't a serious gun, et cetera, et cetera. You got to have this. Right now the new hotness is a staccato. It used to be you had to have a Glock 34 with a light, and now you got an optic, and you got to have a 2011 type pistol. Otherwise, you're just dead in the streets. That's demonstrably BS. One of the problems I see, especially with new people, is they get this counsel, so they just give up. They're like, well, this is such a just screw it. I'm not gonna worry about it anymore because it's just such a pain in the ass. I was tactical most of my life. I counter people. You have to carry this or else. Well, maybe if you're not wearing a plate carrier, running around with your carbine at low ready with your night vision ready to go, you're just not taking life seriously, which is, BS. Every once in a while, you want to wear board shorts and flip flops and maybe take a vacation, chill out. So I will kind of profile where I'm going and what I'm doing. Sometimes I've gone, I'll go on, like when I went on vacation to Belize, couldn't take a gun, is what it is, but I'm going to live my life. I don't live my life for the gear. The gear enhances my life and my ability to do things. I don't live my life for the gear. The gear is a tool, so I don't get emotionally invested in it. But one of the entry level problems I see in this business is that kind of advice. And think about where, what you were talking about. If you felt good with your skills and your abilities, the capability of your gear, if you had something like one of my buddies, Tom Kelly with Darstar Gear, or, I'm friends with John Hopman of Filster. They have some very handy, very small, very concealable holsters. They have the clip type attachments that are very secure on a belt, easy on, easy off. Think about if you could grab that package, clip it into your waistband, and go. Back in the day, we used to call a snub 38 and a pocket holster I got to go to the store and get a jug of milk gun. That's what that was for. Is I got to run to the store and get a jug of milk. Where people didn't want to jock up, strap on all their stuff just to go do this chore, right? So, are you going to be way better off with a snub 38 in your pocket or a Glock 42 in an appendix rig if you are getting jacked while you're out there on this quick errand to go get a jug of milk or whatever? Are you going to be better off with that or without it? And then how much more likely are you to have this gear if it's comfortable, convenient, etc.? Are you going to wish you had a bigger gun? Maybe, but I can't point to, I don't personally know of, and I can't point to cases in the concealed carry world where somebody got dead because they had a 5-shot 38 or they had a, 7-shot, 8-shot Glock 42, et cetera, et cetera. And some of these little guns like the Ruger LCP Max, you can have 13 rounds on board. That's crazy, Yeah, heck, when I started in police work, it was standard to have, you had your 6-shooter and a holster and 2 speed loaders. You had 18 rounds on your person total, and we were expected to go out, crush crime and or evil, and make the world safe for democracy, So at any rate, I teach a small guns class, and I know other guys that do that because I think there's a very real world need for guns that are convenient and comfortable that we can have with us in a wide variety of clothing and a wide variety of circumstances that are truly concealed, that are a surprise when the bad guy picks the wrong victim. So yeah, you made me yeah, your little story there made me start preaching.
Yeah, well, and you've got quotables for days, Chuck. I mean, you could write an entire book just with quotes in it from Chuck Haggard. I mean, it's just one right
So
after the other.
I learned I learned when I was running my program at my department for a while, and I had some younger dudes that were my AIs for my firearms instructor program. And I found out that they had a spiral bound notebook at the back of the class that they would write down Chuckisms
Yeah.
when I would say something, and they would write them down because they were
Yeah.
thought they were particularly humorous or whatever the
Yeah.
case may be. So
Adam has some of those too.
I feel like Bill Murray in Caddyshack when he said, "So I've got that going for me," which is nice.
Oh man, I am so fortunate that you agreed to come on this show, Chuck. You've just been a pleasure to have on. I mean, gosh, we've just like barely dipped our toe in the water of the experience, expertise, and wisdom that you have to offer. We're just so thankful for that. Yeah, and we could just keep going, guys, but I understand we're over the hour. Tell me in the comments if you enjoyed this as much as I did. Chuck, is there anything else that you want to leave people with before we go? Because we're gonna wrap it up here. I promise, really, this time we are.
No, I think I went off
You
on a
said your
couple of
piece?
tangents there.
That's okay. That's okay. Awesome. Awesome. Okay.
So I will say I get hit with people think, oh well, you're just trying to sell training. And what I tell you is, if you don't train with me, train with somebody, train with some quality instructors somewhere.
Yeah.
You can find people like that. And then there's great organizations where you can dip your toe in the water. Range Master Tactical Conference. Robin's excellent. If it's one of the ladies, her Girl in a Gun organization and that National Girl in a Gun Conference, things like that, where you can dip your toe in the water and get a feel for some of these instructors in these short courses and be like, hey, I like this person or I don't like this person, and maybe I want to go train with this person or whatever the case may be. So there's ways to get into some of that. And truthfully, I steer business to other people. I have a very poor business model, and I steer people to other instructors all the time. If one of your questions
probably means you care about your people. You care about people more than you care about money, it sounds like.
Well, yeah. I'm not getting rich doing this. You definitely don't get rich as a cop. And if you are a cop and you're getting rich, then you are under investigation very quickly, as it should be. But one of the things I'll tell people is if you hit me up with a question and it is, hey, I live in Timbuktu. Do you know any good instructors around there? If I do, I'll tell you. So I'll tell you, if you don't train with me, train with somebody.
Sounds like our Montana crowd wants to get you up here, so we might have to make that happen. That would be fun.
I've never been to Montana, so that would be kick-ass.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay, well, we got to do that then. Awesome. Okay, well, I'm going to let you go for now, Chuck. Again, thank you so much. It was just such a pleasure. Had so much fun, and almost got through all the questions.
It was my pleasure entirely.
All right. Thank you. All right, guys. So let's wrap up for the night. I think this is the longest interview that I've ever done. So, but I mean, how could you just not keep going with Chuck? I mean, yeah, wonderful interview. So really quickly, before we wrap up, I'm going to tell you about what to expect on the Defenders Live community. And then I'm going to tell you what to expect for next week, just so you know what's going on now. So thank you to everyone who has supported the Defenders Live community on locals.com. What to expect coming up on that channel is, first, I'm going to be hosting a roundtable discussion about mental and emotional management and mind-body connection. And hopefully this will help improve not only your shooting on the range, but also in your everyday life. I really feel like that's important and something that needs to be touched on. So we're going to be having more of that coming down the line, as well as a series of deep dive interviews, deeper than what I normally do, like on my public channel. I'm going to put these deep dive interviews on the locals.com channel, and I'm going to introduce you to some incredibly special and inspirational women that I know that I think you'll find what they have to say very valuable, very powerful, and they've got some incredible stories that I would like to share with all of you. So if you're interested in checking any of that out, you can join that Defenders Live community at locals.com. Go to the Discover tab and search up Defenders Live, and that's where you can find that. Next week, we are going to have Steve Tarani back on the show. He's going to be talking about his new program called Prefense. And if you have any specific topics or questions that you'd like me to talk to Steve about next week, you can email me at laura@defenders-usa.com. LORA is how you spell my first name, laura@defenders-usa.com. Looking forward to seeing all you beautiful people next Wednesday, same time, same place, 7 p.m. Mountain Time, and it'll be Mountain Standard Time, I think, next week. So we'll see you then. Until then.